you remember where you were this time last year? Or at midnight this time last year? I know exactly where I was. I was lying down with Matilda, listening to the fireworks, while everybody else was downstairs praying. I know it's not technically God's day anymore, but I do like to start the new year with a prayer. It's nice to do that. My wife and I feel we'll do a proper prayer, come True Heavenly Parents Day, but we want to at least start this new calendar year 2017 with a prayer as well. And I remember a couple of years ago we started the prayer and we got a few words out, but then children started crying and that was the end of the prayer. Why are they crying? Because all these bangs and fireworks are going off. It wakes them up, and thankfully that didn't happen last night. Thankfully my wife and I were able to have a peaceful, prayerful moment together, and the children didn't wake up. Wonderful. But it's interesting to kind of think back when there are significant milestones in life, like the start of the new year. You can think back and think about the different places where we were. This time last year I was lying down next to who was then a 2-year-old Matilda. Now she's a whole year older. She's 3, and she doesn't wake up so easily, and I still do need to lie down with her to get her to fall asleep, but it's not as intense as it used to be. Now James has filled those shoes, the littlest one. He's now the one that I have to fill. And so, in my situation, with the children, it's kind of obvious as they are growing older and also as their number is increasing. My capacity is being stretched in different ways. I'm being forced to grow. I could choose not to grow, but then I think my children would suffer as a result, and my wife too. And so the reality of my life is that certainly for the last 12 or 13 years, I can catalogue, I can reflect very carefully about where I was at various stages in my life in terms of my family's development and how that has been, in a sense, forcing me to grow. And my wife and I frequently ask ourselves this question: are we doing it right? Are we doing it well? Are we doing this whole parenting thing well? Are we doing this whole marriage thing well? Are we doing this whole, pastor thing well? Are we doing this whole national leader shindig well? It's all these very difficult questions which are perhaps difficult to answer in the moment. And whatever situations we might be in, we're in the situation, we're in the context. It's a bit difficult to take a few steps back and look at things perhaps objectively from a distance to review how things currently are going. If you're familiar with mathematics and if you're trying to judge whether a curve is increasing or decreasing, when you zoom in to the very small details, it's difficult to tell where it's going, where is the overall trend. You need to somehow take a step back to appreciate, where is this curve going? Is it growing, or is it possibly even stagnating? And the nice thing about time, the nice thing about hindsight, is you can look back and you can recognize, well, certainly in my life, I think there was a time where I was less trusting in God, less faithful in that really, in the sense in which I really put my life in God's hands, and I trust God, and I trust God's teachings, I trust the principle. There was a certain agreement with it. Yes, I agree with this, but it wasn't like putting my whole life faithfully into it. And I can compare the Matthew who used to be like that some years ago to the Matthew who I am today, and realize, wow, I feel so much freer now in my current state than who I used to be because of that deeper trust, because of really allowing God to guide me and lead me, and having had amazing experiences of living that kind of real life of faith, which for me it has been very exciting. Or perhaps there are other aspects to which my heart has grown, to which my character has developed, and certainly when I think about who I used to be and who I am now, another thing, I'm a much more optimistic person. I'm a much more hopeful person. Come New Year's Day, I feel really hopeful about 2017. Do you guys feel very optimistic and hopeful? I hope so. I know a lot of folks were very miserable about 2016. You know, there were apparently lots of things to be miserable about. But even then, I didn't feel miserable about 2016. I felt, okay, there may be some unexpected events, some setbacks, but really, if with God trying to take things forward, and with me trying to work with God and work with others who are trying to work with God and to make this world better, there's a lot to be hopeful for. And it's not just, I think, it's not just some hopeless, optimistic idealism which is not rooted in reality. I'd like to think that my optimism is grounded in some kind of appreciation of the realities of how messy life is. And yet I'm hopeful. There was a time where perhaps I was more cynical, and so that is something which is growing in me. But are there some aspects about myself which are stagnating? Something about myself which has been like that for a very long time and hasn't really been resolved. Recently, even just a few weeks ago, I realized that there was something in really deep down, buried in the root of my heart, which really was a barrier in my life. And I was making up a lot of excuses to pretend to myself and to others that it wasn't a real issue. It's not a real thing. It's someone else's problem, someone else's issue. But recently I came to a very painful but profound realization that yes, the problem is with me, and I need to sort this out. This has been stagnating for far too long, and part of stagnation is that it doesn't move. And you know how still water, all the dirt kind of floats to the top or sinks to the bottom perhaps, and you have this clear looking water. It looks fine, but actually when you shake it up, you realize actually there's a lot of dirt there. And so I'm trying to fix that problem, fix that deep issue which needs to be resolved somehow. It needs to be liberated somehow. And I look forward to a time, maybe this time next year, when I can look back and realize, wow, I was held back by that issue back then. Now I'm not. I would like that. But currently, in the moment, I'm trying to address that stagnation. Maybe there are some other issues which are in where I am stagnating and I'm not even aware of it. Or, even worse, to answer this question, am I growing well? Perhaps I'm not even growing. Perhaps I'm regressing. I'm getting worse, perhaps, in some areas. I don't know, using more foul language than I used to do. Or it could be all sorts of things. I want us to reflect on where we are now, and I think today is a good opportunity to ask this question. Am I growing well? Are we growing well? Think about your timeline of life, the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 20 years. How have things been going? Are you growing? Are you recognizing the growth in your life? Do you recognize areas of stagnation or perhaps even regression where you would like to really interject and intervene in a drastic way and say, no, this year, 2017, is going to be a year of intentional, spiritual growth. Lots of people make New Year's resolutions at this time of year. They might involve some form of, career development or physical health. Some people choose to work out more or do exercise more regularly. What about the spiritual workouts? What about the intentional development of our spiritual fitness? Maybe some of you are already in that habit. Maybe some of us could do with that again. On a program like STF, some of us were involved in MFT or other kinds of frontline formula course training. Periodically, I was reflecting on a daily basis about my growth, evaluating myself. We had these very thorough forms, which in hindsight perhaps were a little bit too thorough. But you had all these questions asking about 20 or 25 different questions about how was the day in different areas, and I had to give myself a score out of 5 for every single one of these things. I'm not suggesting that we do that necessarily, but some people keep a diary, some people do regular self-evaluation. I want us to ask ourselves, how are we growing? Are we growing well? And subsequently, in which direction do we need to go in next? Now, there is hope because we have time. We're all alive here today, which means we have time ahead of us. None of us know exactly how much time we have, but we have time. And things grow through time, which is good news. And that's another reason to be hopeful, isn't it? And also, things grow step by step. I'm going to share with you a verse here from the Muslim tradition, from the Quran, talking about the step-by-step process of growth. Oh man, of course women as well, but oh man, verily you are ever toiling on towards your Lord, painfully toiling, but you shall meet him. You shall surely travel from stage to stage. That's Surah 84, verses 6 and 19. Verily, truly, absolutely, you are ever toiling, painfully toiling. It does feel like a painful toil sometimes, doesn't it? This effort to grow. Maybe we're banging our head against a wall. Maybe we're trying to break through in a certain area in our life. It could be financial. It could be relational. It could be with respect to some kind of personal habit which I'm trying to break, or a habit which I'm trying to develop, and maybe things aren't sticking in the way they want, in the way I want them to. And it feels like a painful toil to grow. But the hopeful message here from the Quran is, we shall meet the Lord, and we'll surely travel from stage to stage. I think as being a community of faith which is so idealistic, we set such a high standard. We talk about Chonyeolguk, we talk about this nation of unity and peace, and it's cosmic, it combines everything together, and we talk about ideal families, and it's such a high standard. Sometimes our reality seems so far away, it might be tempting to give up, tempting to just be satisfied with the way things are and not make any progress, just be comfortable and not step out of our comfort zone. But the good news is that we can just progress step by step. Wherever we are now, think about one step further and make that step, and then take another step. So I think part of the challenge in growing is coming out of our comfort zones. If you think about all these creatures which grow inside some kind of exoskeleton, maybe like a lobster or a crab, or even a snake which grows in its own skin, and then its skin gets too small for itself. It then has to, in a sense, die to itself. The outer layer has to die, and then it has to wriggle out of its old shell, out of its old skin, and be born anew, as a new snake, as a new crab, as a new lobster, whatever it is, abandoning its old life. Step by step, it does that many times in its life as it grows bigger, as it grows older. And there's some discomfort involved in that process, isn't there? You get to a point where you feel comfortable, but then you grow some more and you become uncomfortable as you kind of reach that boundary of comfort zone and discomfort zone. You embrace the discomfort, and then you grow. And my experience of living a life of faith is that when I put my trust in these principles and in God's plan for my life, God frequently is putting me in a position of discomfort. Is that your experience as well? This religious life is not an easy ride. We can't cherry pick our faith. We can't cherry pick the way in which we want to grow. Some people do that. They say, I'm going to pick a path of life. I'm going to choose a worldview or a religious philosophy which suits my comfort zones. And we kind of tailor-make our religious path based on what we feel comfortable with. And there's a great danger in that, because it creates an idolatry. It creates an arrogance within us, which means we think we know what's best, and we only accept scriptures or nice quotations which resonate with what we feel deep inside. But actually, in my experience, reading God's word is an argument. It's a battle where God is challenging me with these great ideas, challenging ideas, which say, you need to change. You need to grow. You need to do something differently. That's uncomfortable. It means I have to painfully toil to change myself. So maybe that's a starting point for some of us. It's about accepting that we need to embrace some discomfort within myself this year, and be brave enough to do that. Maybe some of us that's a terrifying thought, a terrifying prospect. But I want us to have the courage to be able to do that, to grow from stage to stage. But what are we growing particularly? What is it? What's the most important thing to grow? Is it the size of our intellect, our academic capacity? Is it growing our influence in society? These are all good things. But let's go to the Christian tradition, to the words of St. Paul in his letter to the Ephesians for some inspiration about the area in which we need to be focusing on growth. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. Maybe the syntax of that sentence is a little bit awkward for us to journey around, but to take out the words in the middle, what it's saying is we are to grow up in love. All the words in between are kind of commentary or elaboration on that main idea. The main idea here is how we're meant to grow. What is it about our spirituality that we're trying to grow? We're trying to grow our love. Again, I don't think I need to convince many of you guys about that. That's probably quite obvious. But maybe it just needs to be reiterated that this year, in terms of our spiritual growth, if we're going to be setting ourselves a spiritual resolution, let's focus it on our ability to love, our capacity to love, our comfort zones, our discomfort with respect to love. And then St. Paul uses this interesting metaphor to help us qualify what this love looks like. To grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. St. Paul is encouraging the Christian community here in Ephesus to grow in love, to love like Jesus Christ loved. The kind of selfless and forgiving, merciful, but also very righteous love of Jesus Christ. And then he uses this very interesting metaphor of Christ being the head of a body. This is a familiar theme in St. Paul's writings, where he describes the Christian community as a human body with organs and different cells which work together, centered on the head, which is Christ. Even the divine principle uses this kind of metaphor when it talks about the separation of powers, legislative, executive, and judicial. It describes the ideal human society as a perfectly functioning human body with a brain and the spinal column being almost like God, and Christ giving the leadership for society. Now, I studied biochemistry, so I don't like this metaphor. Because, okay, I agree, take a normal human being, take their head away, there's not a lot the body can do. The head is important, I accept that. But I feel, okay, St. Paul did not benefit from the privileged position of understanding about DNA, or about how every cell has its own nucleus of information which guides it. Even the divine principle, which was written in the 1950s, the DNA molecule was only really modeled. The molecule was modeled a year before, in the 1950s as well. So it's not a big point at all, but as a biochemist, I think God and Christ is not in the head, but it's actually in the nucleus of every single cell. Every single cell has a little bit of God in it, which tells it what to do. And my understanding of how enzymes and proteins work in relationship with that nucleus is profound. That actually God is within every single one of us. Even Christ, you could see true parents is in our DNA. And for those of us who are blessed children, born into a relationship with true parents as second or third generation members, then it's literally true that our DNA has been, you could say infected, that's maybe a negative word to use, but infused with a true parent's essence, a true parent's vibration, which somehow is affecting our DNA. And so deep in every single cell of us, we're connected with our origin, with Christ, with true parents. And so we're just trying to resemble. Every single cell is trying to resemble the DNA, the information which is inside of it. And of course, each cell is different. Each cell is unique. It performs different functions. And let's not get stuck on red blood cells, which don't have a nucleus, but that's a completely different issue altogether. But the idea I want to focus on here, elaborating on St. Paul's idea, is that we are designed to love. Love is in our DNA. Love is what we're born to be like. Let's elaborate on this. I'm going to look at True Father's words here now and elaborate on this idea of what it means to love. This is from 1996. God's central concern is with human beings' internal nature and character. He intends that as we experience true love, we will come to reflect his true love and grow to perfection. God created the power of love to be the strongest among all internal forces. Through experiencing the power of such love within the realm of heaven's love and law, people are to increasingly resemble God, their parent. So there we go. This growing in love is meant to be in resemblance to our Creator, our heavenly parent. This is the motto that we have for the last couple of years, and I think also for the next few years, to become people who practice true love and resemblance to our Creator, the heavenly parent. It's quite simple, but I want us to be intentional in setting goals in our growth towards that. These words are profound. I want to look at them, sentence by sentence, because I think every single little phrase here has meaning. God's central concern is with human beings' internal nature and character. How many of us have maybe focused more on the external result than on the internal character that we're cultivating? I know I do this myself sometimes, that in trying to bring a result which can be measured, I'm in a sense making shortcuts. I'm making unethical shortcuts in order to reach a certain goal. But that's not God's central concern. Of course, God is concerned about the external results, but God's central concern is with our internal nature, with our character. If our character is growing, and we believe in the principle, the results should just come. But my great frustration and what breaks my heart is to think about how many times we as a community have maybe not put our faith in that idea, that actually the internal matters most, and that the external, as a shadow of the internal, will just naturally bear fruit when we focus on the internal growth. Are we growing internally? I'm really worried that maybe some of us have been stagnating for 20 or 30 years. And I'm 33, so that would be virtually my whole life of stagnation. But seriously, I'm worried about that. I'm worried that maybe we're doing these incredible things. It seems on the outside that we're incredibly busy and doing a lot, but are we growing? As an individual, am I becoming more mature? A more loving person? Am I a person of character, whose words can be trusted, who has integrity, who can be trusted, who knows how to love people in different contexts and situations, who's a genuinely decent bloke or lady, yeah? Are we cultivating character in what we're doing? Or are we making results at the expense of our internal growth? I'm not saying that's across the board, but I do see it, and that worries me. God intends that as we experience true love, we will come to reflect his true love and grow to perfection. Maybe that's where the issue lies. Are we experiencing God's true love? Are we going out of our way to fall in love with God, to fall in love with the universe, to fall in love with the true love that's all around us? Maybe there's barriers in our heart which block us from experiencing that true love. That's where I need to break through, to really fall in love with God's true love. Allow myself to be washed away by grace and mercy and absolute love. God created the power of love to be the strongest among all internal forces. Do we trust that? Do we believe that? Or do we use other forces? Or put our faith in money perhaps? Money is a very powerful force. It's necessary, we need it, it's very good, but money can't buy love. Yeah, you can throw a lot of money at someone, but it won't help them become a more loving person if they're not actually trying to become a more loving person, if they're not experiencing true love and being guided and educated to experience true love. Thankfully, here in the UK, our foundation is reasonably healthy, financially speaking. We have resources to invest into projects and things, but I'm keenly aware about how we invest those resources to make sure that we use them well. And I feel like we can't just, throw money and expect immediate results if there's no internal growth. True love is the strongest of all internal forces. We know this keenly because the fall resulted as a result of the power of unprincipled love. And we need to be keenly aware of that no matter how knowledgeable we are about the truth or the principle, love trumps that. God made it that way. God made love to be the most powerful force in the universe. And that's the same for false love as it is for true love. Now, of course, I believe that true love is stronger than false love. But it's so easy for us to be swept away by false love. That's why we need to be intoxicated by true love. To have that root, to have that anchor, that relationship with God, which True Father talks about a bee, which is sucking on nectar. You can pull on it and it doesn't want to let go. Personally, I've never tried that experiment before. I don't want to get stung, but I trust him. If any of you have had such a similar experience, please let me know. But I like the idea. I like the idea of being so in love with God's true love that you just cannot be tempted by anything else. Through experiencing the power of such true love within the realm of heaven's love and law, people are to increasingly resemble God, their parent. So we become godlike. We become godlike in our love. True Father then explains more about this, about what this love looks like, how this love grows step by step, stage by stage. And honestly speaking, usually when I think about this, the default I think about is the four great realms of heart. The filial heart, the fraternal heart, the conjugal heart, and the paternal heart. But I keep forgetting something, and this is maybe more for me than it is for you, but it's the quotation that we read out on the service sheet. We need to embody true love, and the way to embody true love begins by living as a filial child, then a patriot, a saint, and finally a divine son and daughter of God. At that stage we can experience the innermost emotions of God's heart. When we're reciting the family pledge, this comes before the four great realms of heart. This is part of pledge number 2. Four great realms of heart comes in pledge number 3. So if we're thinking about expanding our love, expanding our hearts, this should be what comes first. The way to embody true love begins first by living as a filial child. Okay, that's comparable with four great realms of heart. Start as a filial child. Someone who knows how to receive the love of the parents, to be grateful for it, and to honor the parents, to honor God, to love my parents, to take care of my parents, to honor their wishes, and not necessarily to agree with everything they say, but at least to honor them and to love them with that filial heart. It also extends to elders generally, to honor elders and to love elders. But then it expands to patriot. Patriotism is something which is perhaps an uncomfortable idea currently, particularly in the recent year or so with the rise of populist nationalism across, especially Europe. There's a great tension between people who feel patriotic about who they are and their nationality, their identity, and perhaps the threat of people who are not part of that culture, not part of that nationality. How do they mix together? Now, the way I differentiate between nationalism and patriotism, this is just my definition, but you're welcome to accept it or reject it. I define nationalism as the kind of pride in my country which sacrifices other countries for the sake of my own. Whereas I see patriotism as the pride in my country which sacrifices my country for the sake of others. Do you see the subtle difference there? They both involve pride, but one is for the sake of others, and one is sacrificing others for the sake of oneself. And broadly speaking, I do feel very patriotic about the United Kingdom. I think it does an awful lot of good for the sake of the world, and I want it to do more. And this is such an interesting tension politically, whereby some people want to do more for others, and yet want to be able to create the national system which allows us to do that. I don't want to go into that, but I just want us to reflect on that. True parents are asking us to be patriots to our nations, to be patriotic. We should love our countries. And that starts by loving just our neighborhood, really, the people around us. We look at the nation in which we live and we think, what does this nation need? How can we serve it? How can we love it? How can I instill more pride in this country to make it a more glorious nation for God? Not for itself, but a more glorious country for the sake of other countries too. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful virtue. And with the rise of nationalism, I fear that patriotism has been rejected, has been discarded. And I feel like we need to rescue it from self-centeredness and elevate patriotism. In terms of our internal character, in terms of our ability to love, in terms of our spiritual growth, that's something we should all aspire to do, to love our country. The next stage, some of us maybe don't even feel like we're at that stage yet, but let's try to work towards that, but let's cast our vision even further towards the horizon and realize that we're also guided to become saints. What is when True Father uses that word saint, he talks about a person who lives not just for the sake of their country, but for the sake of the whole world. Do you know people like that who've made a worldwide difference? They do exist, these individuals who've really loved the world, who have sacrificed themselves, sacrificed their family, sacrificed their nation, even groups of nations for the sake of the world. And then finally, become a divine son and daughter of God. These are profound ideas, profound. But here's a blueprint for us to follow. It guides us in terms of the stage-by-stage, step-by-step growth. So that in terms of our internal spiritual growth, here's a roadmap for us. Then at that stage, we can experience the innermost emotions of God's heart. That's what we're aiming towards. Imagine 1st of January 2018, I experienced the innermost emotions of God's heart. Maybe some of you are already there, nearly there. You experience most of the emotions. The pain and the sadness, the joy and the hope. But let's really try to grow in that direction. So as a kind of, what are you going to do on Bank Holiday Monday? I want you to set a spiritual resolution for 2018. Not just for 2017. Think about what this year is going to be like so that by 1st of January 2018, what kind of person are you going to be like? Even 2 years from now, 2019, what kind of person are you going to be like? Set a spiritual resolution. Yeah, I remember a few years ago I set a resolution about maybe reading X number of books per month, or getting a few workouts during the week. But you each have your own unique spiritual situation. Now I want to encourage you to set a spiritual goal for this year, for your spiritual growth. Make it intentional. Write it down. Maybe report it to another person so that they can hold you accountable to it, maybe a family member or a close friend, and support each other in that journey. Maybe some of you are already doing that, but maybe some of us need to do this now. Now's a great opportunity to do that, to set a spiritual resolution for the year ahead. How are we going to become more loving? That's the key question. In which way am I going to overcome some discomfort in my heart, which is to love for others? God is incredibly hopeful about this year ahead. 2017 is going to be a great year. There's a lot of good things which are going to happen. We're all going to grow. I want us to be imaginative and creative and hopeful about how we are all going to grow. Not just individually, but even as a community, as families. Let's be really hopeful and set ambitious goals about how we are all going to grow together. God's looking forward to this year ahead. I hope that you can also look forward to it too. Would you like to stand and join in a word of prayer? Dear God, our loving Heavenly Parent, you know our realities, you know our situations. Some of us are making you very proud to see how much effort we're making in our lives to grow and to do great things. Some of us are indeed making great progress, and maybe some of us are struggling, but you recognize the effort that we're making, and you also are patient with us. You want to continue to guide us. You believe in us. You will never stop believing in us and having hope in us. And I pray that we can match your hope with our own hope, that we can also be optimistic and look towards the future with ambitious goals that we can accomplish. I pray that every single one of us today and throughout this year will be able to set a spiritual goal, a spiritual resolution of what we intend to do, who we intend to become over the next 12 months, that we can visualize ourselves standing on this day next year, on the 1st of January 2018, or even a year after that, the 1st of January 2019, or any point in the future that we want, that we can see ourselves having grown in a specific way, that we can put into words and articulate the reality of our situation right now, the challenges which we're facing, the comfort zones that we need to climb out of, the path that we need to pursue in growing. Maybe some of us already feel an abundant love for you as filial children, but we need to expand that to really love the nation and to love the world and to deeply love you as divine sons and daughters who love the whole cosmos. I pray that we can embrace this path with gratitude, and not to be overwhelmed by it, but that we can feel that we can take things step by step, that you are patient with us, that we have time, and that we can deal with each issue as they come along, one by one. And even if we accomplish our resolution quickly, then that's all the better for you and the better for ourselves as we liberate ourselves and grow as beings of love. I'm really looking forward to this year as we all grow in love, as we grow in resemblance to you, as we become people who deep in our hearts become beautiful people who resemble your love and resemble you in your creativity and in your grace, and have the kind of influence to bless others around us. I really pray that we can bless our neighbors and bless this nation. We have many exciting plans for the year ahead through which we want to bless others. I pray that you will work with us, and that as we offer to you the condition of our transformation, as we climb out of our shells and climb out of our skin and die to our old selves and become born anew as new people, that we can be people through whom you can channel abundant blessing to our families and to those around us as well. I want to report this prayer on behalf of everybody here in my name, Matthew Huish of the Blessed Central Family. Adieu.